This was a long, everybody, it's the special meeting of January 23rd, 2024 is upon us. We take a roll call.
Take a roll.
You take a roll call. All right. Then let's get going. We have a staff presentation on the comprehensive plan.
So I'm going to turn it over to our planning manager, Jeff Hurt, to really get into the details of it. And we have principal with design workshop, Jessica Garl here. She's going to be part of the presentation as well. But we're really excited. I mean, this is our first kind of formal engagement with City Council on the comprehensive plan. As you all know, this is a big project for the city. We've been waiting quite a while. We've had lots of discussions over the last couple of years about, hey, just wait till the comprehensive plan so we can try to align our policies with the vision and direction that we think the community wants to go in. And public, I know Jeff's going to go into a lot of detail about how we think the process is going to go. It's a pretty high level presentation, but we want to check in with council. We understand it's really important that you all understand basically how the project's going to be managed, how it's going to be governed, what type of public input's going to happen, the overall time frame. So our intent is to go over that and see if you all have questions. And then Jeff's going to talk about some of the work that's already been done as well. And we can get into the consultant and the makeup of the team and see what questions you have and go from there. So and then the last thing I wanted to say is, we had a lot of talk, a lot of discussion during the work planning about there's probably some initiatives. We don't want to wait on the comprehensive plan. I think just want to reiterate that staff's heard that. We understand the housing study is going to get completed here soon. There's probably some what we're talking about strategic initiatives. So we're also intending to work with City Council and the community on those strategic initiatives and further define those and then work through those concurrently with the comprehensive plan. So just to reiterate that point too. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Rob. So again, my name is Jeff Hurt and I'm the planning manager in the community development department. Nice to meet you all. And I'm sort of the city's project manager for this process. We have a consultant team that we'll introduce here shortly. That's managing it from their standpoint. Our purpose tonight really is just to sort of introduce the project, which is in its very early stages, give you a status update, even start at a really high level of what a comp plan even is and why we're doing it. And we do have some, just like Rob said, overview of the proposed process and some of the key themes we think we'll hear from the community about. We do have some targeted questions for you. We're open to however you want to take this tonight. If you want to ask questions about the project and what a comp plan is, but we do have some targeted questions for you to guide the discussion through. Oh, okay. So we've got about a 15-minute presentation here, starting with kind of what a comp plan is, and then I'll talk a little bit about community engagement, next steps. Like I said, it is required by state law for us to do a comp plan. It is required by our city code also to do a comp plan update every 10 years. We are at that 10-year mark. A comp plan is City Council adopted policy. It's not regulatory. A lot of people get confused that this changes zoning. It does not, but it does sort of create the foundation for those types of future land use changes, and we'll get into that. And it has a bit more teeth, I think, than a lot of people realize, and happy to talk about that too. It is at its core really a land use development and sort of infrastructure plan. There's so many things that are ancillary to that that it touches. So we'll talk about that here a bit. So the typical components, I'll just kind of walk through what a typical comp plan looks like. This is by no means what our outline is, and there's no sort of one size fits all, but I'll walk through some of these components, but it will include sort of an existing conditions report. I think it is sort of a state of the city report as it relates to land use and development and sort of trends around the built environment. And then there'll certainly be an action plan, which we don't know what that looks like yet, but in terms of roles, responsibilities, costs, timing, things like that to implement the plan. Wanted to touch on the vision and values component of the plan. There is this element of the 2013 plan, but it's really important and something we really don't want to shortchange. This is intended to be sort of the community's articulation of what's most important to us. What is our vision? What are our values? This can take the form of guiding principles, goals, whatever you want to call it. We don't know yet. This is an important sort of foundation for the plan. And so as I go through these slides, I'm going to give some examples of how these components are actionable. Sort of in terms of what would be actionable from vision and values, we would like for the policies to be tied to the vision and value statements as we get into plan development. But there's all kinds of other, I think, opportunities to use these vision and value statements in terms of city council's strategic planning and work planning, budgeting, things of that nature can really tie to these, and a lot of other communities have done that. So I'll touch on the land use framework component of the plan. There will be a future land use map, sort of accompanying policies that go with that. And so again, this is not a zoning map, but this sets the foundation for future land use decisions. So some examples of how this particular component is actionable. So for example, as private development proposals come into us, plan unit development, subdivisions, rezonings, things like that, we are bound per city code to look at those through the lens of this plan, for example. So this is an important component of that. And so out of this, we don't know yet, but out of this, I would expect there'll be recommendations for changes to our zoning code to align with what we hear from the community in terms of preferences for community character, design, things like that. Our zoning regulations need to sort of align with what comes out of this plan. Happy to talk more about any of this in detail. This is again the high level view of this. The future land use framework can also be an opportunity for us to look at public facilities in the future, future locations, expansions, even land acquisitions, things of that nature. Not saying that's where we're at, but it is one example of how it could be actionable. The transportation component of this is similar to the land use component in that it's the foundation for transportation decisions. We obviously did a transportation master plan in 2019 that city council adopted. We'll look to build off of that. But again, in terms of how this would be actionable, ideally, if you could visualize sort of a future transportation connections map with dashed lines for where we want to see connections. As private development comes in, we'll look to this plan to get those connections potentially, and have it sort of like piecemeal done that way and have development sort of pay its own way for those connections. The city could also look to update its street design standards for how we classify streets, what the typical street sections we would like to see, and how those streets look like. The comp plan can be a foundation for that. And certainly for our CIP work, this is an important foundation or can be. And obviously the transportation framework should tie closely to the land use framework, and happy to talk about that more. So as this is a comprehensive plan, we expect a whole host of other topics to be addressed from a policy standpoint. This is just an example of some of the things we expect to be front and center in terms of EDI, housing affordability, et cetera. We'll go through each one of these. We recognize that there are other city plans and policies that dive into a lot of these things more. So the plan is an opportunity, the comp plan is an opportunity to sort of reinforce those, align with those, possibly create new policies, but the intent is for it to be sort of connecting the dots across different, some of these different worlds that we all live in. So some examples of some of these parallel city projects that are active right now, meaning they're about to start, they're well underway, or they're wrapping up. These are just three of them. There's lots of them. I'm happy to talk more about that. But the Prost Master Plan update, which is Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails, is planned to start later this year. We're actively talking with folks in parks to see how these two plans can align in terms of the land use framework and the other policies. There's work being done downtown, obviously, that will align with this plan. And then the housing plan, which will come to you soon as possible, will likely have some recommendations that apply tied closely to the comp plan in terms of future land use and other policies where the comp plan is sort of build off of the trajectory that's set in the housing plan in terms of looking at places where different types of housing might be appropriate in the community. So community, so this is sort of a community sort of expression of what's most important to us. Community engagement is critical to the success of the project. And so again, happy to walk through more of this in detail, but our plan has essentially 3 engagement windows, as we're calling it. These would be about more than a month, I would say more like a quarter, where each period of time would be sort of an engagement blitz that I'll talk more about here in a minute. But the first one that we're planning for, and we've already kind of started, would revolve around community discussions around community vision and values and some of those high level questions. That's a really important foundation. That's why it's really important for us to spread the word in the community for people to know how important it is to engage like from the beginning, because this is like a whole process that we build off of engagement windows. So, and then the second engagement window, and there's a schedule assigned to this that I'll walk through, but the second engagement window, we don't know what it looks like yet, but there'll be choices, trade-offs, land use scenarios, things of that nature, that we'll dive into more details as soon as later this year. And then there'll be an engagement window around the draft plan itself. So the engagement types that we're looking at, we have a lot of engagement occurring through these engagement windows, but during these engagement windows, we'll come to city council. We'll be going to city council throughout the process to check in, and we go to the planning commission as well. We are going to other city boards and commissions. I think we're going to at least 7 or 8 other boards and commissions during these windows to check in with them. We already had 3 of those. We've got 4 or 5 more. And we're also doing focus groups. Our consultants have started those already in terms of groups of people that have sort of a topical focus, whether it's development or transportation or sustainability. Those are well underway. Happy to talk more about that. There'll be lots of public events also, open houses, virtual events. The idea and the overarching theme is to kind of meet people where they're at, so as many people as possible can engage. We want to hear from as many voices as we can in the community, especially the folks that are hard to reach, the underrepresented groups. That'll be very much a focus of this project. So we'll have online engagement, virtual and in person, and we'll also have intercept events, as we call them, where we have a presence at places where people are already at, community gatherings, big community events, where we'll have a booth, things of that nature, so people can be aware of the project and know how to engage. So our project structure, this is again a city council adopted document, so you're at the top, obviously. Planning commission does have a codified role as a decision-making or a recommending body. So they will provide project guidance and sort of oversight throughout the process, and ultimately a recommendation to city council for whether or not to adopt the plan. And in parallel, I mentioned the boards and commissions and the focus groups. We've assembled an interdepartmental team of city staff across the different departments to sort of interface with this work that's already been meeting. And we also have a consultant team led by Design Workshop. And so Jessica Garrow from Design Workshops, the principal with the firm, is here to just sort of introduce herself and introduce the team and share a little bit about their background and their expertise and kind of what they bring to the table. We'll circle back to me and we'll kind of wrap things up. So Jessica, if you're ready to go, we can switch the sharing here, and you pull up the screen. This might take a second.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then Allison, who's our project manager, is also on, and if it's possible to elevate her to a panelist, we would love to both be able to say hi and introduce ourselves to you. I will go ahead and get started on screen sharing. Let's see, here we go. Great. Well, as Jeff said, my name is Jessica Garrow. I'm a principal with Design Workshop, and we are so thrilled to be supporting the city in your updated comprehensive plan. I'm going to pass it to Allison to walk through our first slides to introduce our team. And then we thought we would provide a little bit of background about our experience within the region and comprehensive planning so that you can understand a little bit more about us. So Allison, I'll turn it to you.
Great. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm so excited to get to see everyone in this room. We look forward to continuing to work with you throughout this process. Next slide. Our team, myself and Jessica, are really involved in the day-to-day operations, leading Design Workshop, but we are joined by a deep bench of resources within our firm. Riley is a public engagement specialist who's helping to craft some of our strategies so that we can really get that robust participation that Jeff described earlier, as well as many project staff and a lot of different team members working behind the scenes to help bring this to fruition. We are joined by a team of experts because comprehensive plans by nature are comprehensive and therefore bring a lot of different pieces of the puzzle together. And so our partners at Spirit Environmental, we work with Connor and his team to address a lot of issues around hazard resiliency, sustainability, water conservation, and a lot of public and open lands and thinking about how all of those pieces of the environmental system plays in with the land use and transportation that our land planners have expertise within. Similarly, we work with Fair and Peers a lot throughout the region, longtime partners. Carly is leading from the Fair and Peers side, really recognizing that land use and transportation are integrated, especially when it comes to comprehensive planning. And finally, rounding out our team, we have Rachel with EPS. They represent the economic side of the story. So recognizing that growth within the region is impacting the potential for Louisville to address kind of the changing nature of the community. So growth, development, the demand being pressed by current regional trends as well as local trends. And they will help to provide a robust understanding of the trade area, housing, coordinating with your existing housing assessment, and support us through different growth scenarios when it gets to scenario planning later in the process. Next slide. So at Design Workshop, we recognize that environment and economics, art, and community are really interwoven in all the work that we do, and especially in comprehensive planning. So our toolkit of legacy design recognizes that all of these are part of the story. And so we have a toolkit that we will use to ensure that all of these different pieces are interwoven throughout the process, whether it's in our project management or within the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. So this slide demonstrates what some of those different pieces are and how they align within the legacy design principles. So within environment, we're thinking about infrastructure and climate. With the community, we're thinking about housing and resilience, social equity and inclusion. Art is really kind of the character and the historic nature of the Louisville community. And finally, economics, recognizing that there's a diverse economy and workforce that really needs to be considered as we move into the comprehensive plan as a guiding document for the future of the Louisville community.
Thanks, Allison. So Design Workshop is a national firm. We do have 8 offices throughout the country. The Louisville project is staffed out of our Denver and our Aspen studios, bringing the experts that we have within our team here in Colorado to really support you in the comprehensive plan effort. Jeff and Rob asked us to just describe a little bit about our experience so that you know a little bit more about us. This is just a snapshot of some of the projects that we've worked on over the past 5 to 7 years. So you can see those on the map. There were 4 areas that we maybe wanted to highlight as similar to the project here in the city of Louisville. So we've recently supported both Boulder County and the city of Boulder on parks, recreation master plans, and open space plans. We've supported the town of Erie with some on-call services related to design and development, as well as supporting on economic development analysis. We've supported an open space plan for Arapahoe County, and then in Adams County, we worked with Fair and Peers on transportation master plan and park and open space plan, and we've also supported them on some zone district updates. So we're really familiar with the region as a whole and bring that expertise and knowledge to the city of Louisville process. We also do a lot of comprehensive planning throughout the country. We wanted to just highlight maybe a few from the Western region so that you can understand some of our experience. So we've recently completed a countywide comprehensive plan for Mesa County. They have a little bit of a different structure in how they do their comprehensive plan, but we really dug deeply into understanding land use framework and how that relates to zoning. And so that's something that is a really key piece of most comprehensive plans, and we'll be doing with the city of Louisville's process. We've also recently had a number of projects with the city of Provo in Utah. We did some initial work on their comprehensive plan, and that moved pretty quickly into conservation and resilience planning. And we were really eager to work with that community, in some ways very similar to the city of Louisville. And then finally, Allison and I, in the last year, completed the community vision plan for the town of Telluride. Jeff talked about the different stages of comprehensive planning, and that we really base comprehensive plans in community vision and community values. So the town of Telluride kind of divided their plan a little bit. We really dug deeply into a vision and values piece. And so we really see that as foundational to the work. Really briefly, Fair and Piers is very familiar with the area. They've worked on South Boulder Road improvements, traffic signal master plan, and the Future 42 corridor plan. They also have an extensive amount of comprehensive plan experience. They worked with us on the Mesa County plan, and you can see here some plans in Colorado. With Spirit Environmental, they are a very frequent collaborator with us. Connor, before he moved to Spirit, he did work with the city of Louisville on your energy action plan, and so he'll bring that knowledge to this project. Spirit has also worked with City of Santa Fe on their sustainability plan and the Longmont sustainability plan, and so really great experts in that area. And then finally, EPS, they have supported, and apologies, there's an error on the slide here. The one on the left is actually the city of Fort Collins citywide master plan. They've also supported Blueprint Denver and the Longmont Comprehensive Plan, really on that economic and the housing perspective. And they have experience within the city of Louisville related to some economic development, and are kind of hitting the ground running as we're working through existing conditions analysis for the plan. So I'll pause there. We're happy to answer any questions, but Jeff, I might turn it back to you to finish up with our project schedule and some of our next steps.
Sure. Jeff, can I interrupt for just a second? I just asked Director Zakaro to circulate that PowerPoint, so we have that, because that's not in the packet, but
Right, yeah.
that'll be really useful. And it was a good presentation. Let's understand all of the different groups of folks involved. Yeah, thanks. Go ahead.
So yeah, thanks Jessica and Allison. Yeah, we're really excited to work with that team. They're really well respected kind of in the planning and the transportation world, have a great reputation. So I think we're really lucky to have them, and we're excited for them to kind of bring their regional and national expertise to the project. So thank you. And they are going to be available for questions as we get into the discussion as well. So I'll just wrap up last slide and we'll tee up the questions. So high level schedule. That is subject to change, but the plan going forward is, and this schedule on the screen just sort of maps out major things, so our engagement windows and then the draft plan itself. So engagement window 1 that I mentioned is sort of just getting started in the very early stages, but that's sort of the first quarter of this year. We'll do that sort of engagement blitz. And then there'll be some development of trade-offs and choices based on that feedback. Later this year, as soon as later this year, we'll go back for another engagement window with some specific options, choices, trade-offs, like I said. But the plan overall for the actual draft plan adoption is about an 18-month process, is our aim. So mid to late 2025 for final adoption is our target again. So that concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions you have about what our comp plan is, what we're doing, why we're doing it. We've just got a couple targeted questions for you to kind of frame the discussion, however you want to go from here.
First, does everybody have a couple of questions? They're there.
Can we do quick intros?
Pardon me?
Can we do quick intros?
We'll hold on for just a second. Why don't we, let's take questions, first of all, from council. They're about the questions and whether these are going to be the questions that we want to answer. And then we can we can take public comment. Glad to have everybody introduce themselves. We don't have placards, so I suppose that's probably, that's fine. Why don't we do that before we go further?
Carol Fox, Deputy City Manager.
Hi, Jeff Durbin, sitting in future after counselor for Ward 3 for the city council.
Judy Curran.
Caleb Dickinson, Ward 1.
Chris Lay, Mayor.
Deb Fahey, Ward 2.
Rob Ducaro, Community Development Director for the city.
Jeff Hurt, planning manager of the city.
Her new city clerk.
Why don't we just, let's do this. Let's just take council questions on the two questions that we're asking. Are these questions the ones that you want to answer, comfortable with the questions that they've included? Thumbs up? Thumbs down?
So the question is, do you like the
Do
question?
you like the questions?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just doing that because then we can get the public to respond to them.
Great.
Yeah, got it. All right, why don't we go to public comments? Do we have cards? We don't have any cards, right?
But we have
We have, pardon me?
We didn't take sign up first.
Okay, so we'll just have to have people raise their hands. Yeah,
Paper. Can we ask that it a speech instead of the podium, just I'll say it.
that's right.
Thank
Let's while we do that, yeah, we'll have people who are providing public comment come to the podium. Don't be afraid of it. If you don't have experience doing that, just come and you'll be able to see our faces. It's a little easier than our going like that and so forth. So, yeah, go ahead.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Thanks. That feels so official. I'm Tamar Krantz. I live in Louisville, and I just was reading through your packet, and I'm really impressed by the presentation you just had from Design Workshop. And I noticed that they have so much experience on open space. So I wanted to make a suggestion, and that is that you have those three parts that are going to inform the comprehensive plan process, starting with the Prost plan. And I'm wondering if, and then I noticed down in the RFP section that that Design Workshop is going to do or sub out an environmental assessment. So I'm wondering if you would consider elevating the environmental assessment to be parallel with the Prost plan, or to even replace the Prost plan, because we haven't had an open space management plan update, if I'm understanding correctly, since 2004. That's the latest one that's on the city website. So I was just going to ask if you could consider that. And then the other question is just about the focus groups. And I was just really curious what the focus groups are, especially the ones that you've had already underway. And if there's a way to, like, is the public going to be able to register focus groups? I don't really know how it's gonna work, or become, I don't know the difference between a focus group and a stakeholder group, but if there's a way for groups in the public to become stakeholders or become members of a focus group, it would be really nice for us to know that. And then just finally, if you could just let us know what some of the intercept events are. I'm just kind of curious to get kind of an idea of what that might be. Thanks.
Thank you. When you do give public comment, if you state your name and where you go, just like the summer is going to.
Yeah, Sherry Summer Louisville. So the most important thing, I think, when starting a study like this is to look at the assumptions, because the assumptions provide a framing for what's going to happen. And they, in a large part, dictate the answers, but not dictate, but they shape the answers very strongly. So whenever I see a consultant study, I kind of ask myself, is this the workplace, or is this going to be specifically focused on Louisville? I remember Mayor Ashley Saltzman would often say, when you talk to people in Louisville, there's about 95% agreement, 98% agreement on what people want. They want the small town character, it's easy to get around,
people are friendly, the site is manageable, et cetera. They're concerned about traffic, they're concerned about crowding, they're concerned that it becomes like a different community like Boulder or Denver. So that's kind of like, you don't have to go through nooks and crannies to find that opinion, that's very widespread. So, I see that the way this, assumptions are kind of described is in the legacy design. Then I see environment, economics, art, and all of these things. At the center of that Venn diagram should be Louisville. What do the people want? And that can come from those workshops, but I would have to say the housing workshop I found to be really chaotic. It was not necessarily just people from Louisville, they were from all over. It was very difficult to participate. It was hard to be heard. It was hard to find space. I think we need to be asking Louisville residents what they think, not everyone who just comes by, and that should be the surveys and everything. So we know who is going to be engaged. Similarly, I am a little bit concerned that we're going to be doing the housing study as previous to the comp plan, because we don't know the fiscal implications of what that's going to be. We don't know the overall framework. And I think that's very important. This is a puzzle that needs to be put together. And it can't be, it has to start out as, there has to be some whole thing to make the puzzle wrong. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Others? Okay. Let me, we've got two people online. Do we have any public comment that folks would like to make? Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much. Good comments. Why don't we, let's look back at questions. What does success look like for you for this project? So why don't we get going on that? See what council members to say on that.
Takers?
You just have to jump in, Councilmember Hefner, and I appreciate your doing it.
I'll tell you, I think I have a number of answers, but I'll focus on one that's most important to me, which is.
Can I interrupt you for a second? One of the things that's hard in this is that we don't have microphones. And I noticed, maybe it's just my own hearing or what. I don't know how it is with the folks online, but if you can speak up.
That's, my top framework for success would be a plan that's actionable. So I know Rob previewed for us that there are some tweaks we're planning to do to the land use code prior to completion of the comp plan. I would hope that post completion, we can take the comp plan and roll forward into additional land use code updates. And I think the way the plan comes out has a pretty big impact on our ability to do that well. And so I think a plan that not only has this sort of high level vision and mission and all of that, but has some concrete actionable recommendations of things we can go out and implement and turn into code that then turns into, you know, the development projects we want is a high priority. And obviously there's other frameworks of success as well and substantive ones, but as far as the procedural one, that's high on my list.
Thank you. It's useful. Actually, very good. Others? Yes, Councilmember Curtin.
I think I'd like to make sure that with the groups, the advisory groups that are bringing in the design workshop and internally, that we have a lot of community involvement. I would be very disappointed if we ended up finding out that we have 100 people out of 21,000 residents, and that's all we could find a way to engage. So I think that really working hard on getting community involvement, that's part of what success looks like to me, that we've engaged with all the different areas of Louisville, a lot of people, really given a lot of opportunities. I like the idea, and I appreciate the questions because they were actually on my list of questions, which is, that brings me to focus groups, It also brought me to the public engagement. I really appreciate that we're looking at bringing it to the residents. I'd like to know what that means. When we're trying to engage specific areas, neighborhoods, where does that mean that we're gonna be bringing it to them to help them make it easier to engage? Does it mean that we're gonna be bringing in a translator maybe for some communities, or translators plural for different things? And then the community events, that was the first thought I had too, if we're gonna do things like the street fair or the farmer's market, that we make sure that we're getting input from Louisville residents. Because we do have a lot of people outside the community who attend those events. Not that their information or their ideas aren't interesting, but I think the greatest value needs to be placed on what Louisville residents would like to see. I completely agree with that. So that, for me, I think that's where I look at success comp plan, that this comp plan really represents the current community of people that we have today. We've had a big, I think, a pretty large change in the last 10 years. What are the top 3 issues that I see the project should address? I think we're going to be doing a lot of that with the housing. I think that's one thing that has to come, is we have to find a way to inform the public that there are additional goals, statewide goals too, that the city is being requested to kind of be a participant in. How does that work into a comprehensive plan for the city? But I think it's also making sure that people understand, okay, this is a 10-year plan, but to Councilmember Hopper's point, actionable potentially for 10+ years. You know, so it may be that a project goes underway in 8. We think about it for 5 and it finally gets underway in 8. I'd love for people to understand that so that they can gauge that process. Sometimes it's nice for younger families to put it in terms of their kids' age. Your kids are in elementary school, what would you like to see done before they hit high school? Like that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. I just want to add one additional thought to the topic regarding engagement in families. You know, at least for me, the first thing that comes to mind when someone says engage the community is I think of adults. But I would love if there's a way that we can engage our younger citizens. It might be earlier on in the process with the vision building, because to Councilmember Kern's point, they're gonna be here in 10 years and hopefully they'll move back and this is gonna be their city long term. So I wanna make sure their voices are represented in this. I don't know how that's done. I'll leave it to the experts, but I just wanna make sure we pull in the youth in this conversation.
We are going to the youth advisory board soon. We have and our team will help us with other methods, like going to the school district, for example, can be an effective method to reach. But it's great, it's a great point.
Councilmember Faith.
I will expand on that and say, in addition to getting the information from the youth, I'd also like to get it from the older residents, people who are trying to figure out whether they can afford to retire here. And that kind of brings me also to the whole fiscal responsibility issue. And we can come up with a wonderful plan that's going to say, we want to do this and this and this and this. But if we don't have the money to do it, how are we going to prioritize what actually gets done?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I appreciate a lot of comments about engagement of the community, whether it's kids or our older community or what have you. I think that, what does success look like to you? I've been on council for 5 years, but our last comp plan was way before I was super engaged with city events. I was living here, but I didn't go to the comp plan meetings back then. So, experiencing this as a council member is important to me, but how do you get, I ran for council and I've done it a second time. I care deeply about my community. I didn't go to these meetings in 2010, 11, 12, 13. You did, but like I didn't, my wife didn't, she's super engaged. How do we get people who do care, but are busy, have young kids, we have a 2-year-old and infant? How do you get busy people who are generally happy with their community to come out and engage in a conversation? We have 10 to 20 people that engage with us regularly, which represents like less than 0.5% of our community, right? And the other 99.9% of our community doesn't engage regularly. So I know there's a lot of effort to get this public engagement, but who's coming? Is it kids? Is it other people? Is it happy people? Is it angry people? Is it new people? Certainly, I hope that people that don't live in Louisville engage, because they can't live in Louisville and they want to. So I hope they engage as well. That's a big thing about affordable housing is, you know, and then when we had our task force on EDI, you have to welcome in people that aren't currently in your community because they've already been excluded. And so, I think that's actually an important piece of it. So, you know, what success looks like for me is robust engagement with a diverse group of people, and you can name that diversity in lots of ways, socioeconomic, all those different ways. And in the end, the 6 of us are stuck and privileged with making some decisions about all that input, but we're gonna do the best job possible when we have really good input from lots and lots of people. So that's, I think I mostly agree, and just kind of adding a couple pieces to it.
Other comments? Yes.
I would just second the point about people who have already been excluded. And I would add to that list, and I apologize if somebody said this already, people who work here but don't live here, people who have businesses here but don't live here. I don't know, maybe people send their kids to school here, but don't live here, right? There's all kinds of people who interact with the city frequently that don't necessarily live here.
Yes.
I guess this is directed to Jeff. Do you know, Jeff, is part of that community engagement going to be things like setting something up at the rec center, or setting something up at trailheads? Maybe it's even just informational paper where somebody can have a QR code to put on their phone that comes up with a survey. Make it easier for people.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the ways that I think that we can do that as well. I mean, and they're easy, inexpensive things to do, you know, or I don't know, I mean, like, maybe it's, we do something special other than just say, come to the rec center, we're gonna set some tables up on this, but it's like, hey, we're gonna have a bouncy house for your kid. We don't have to, I'm just throwing, you know, we're gonna have a bouncy house for your kids, and, you know, a table full of cookies, so come and talk, come and tell us your opinions, and as long as your kids can bounce, you can talk to us. Something, you know, just I'm trying to think of creative ways to, because it's a serious topic, but it also should be fun. I mean, we all get to make a decision on this, and so I appreciate both sides of it, and I think the more fun we can make this for our neighbors, for the rest of the community, I think the more likely we're going to come and chat with us and chat with you and tell you what they think.
Thanks. Councilman Buffet.
Yeah, I will add on to that, in addition to being fun and publicizing it in various ways, is the timing of those meetings, because, you know, elderly people are not gonna be coming at night, for example. But people with young kids aren't gonna be coming during the day, or if you're working full time, you can't come during the day. So finding different times to hold different meetings would be helpful. Also, in the publication and notices of the meetings, another thing the older residents do is read the newspaper, and they don't look at QR codes. Or a lot of us don't. So going with everybody's different way of accumulating information about the events would be helpful.
Very good. I'll add a couple of things here. Very good comments so far. And I think we have more to go, because I think there's stuff that we'll probably want feedback as we think through these measures of success. I mean, one of the things, kind of at a really high level. But Louisville is I would say, diverse and not diverse. I mean, there are ways in which we're not diverse, right? Economically, in many ways. That's not completely true, though, either. It is probably true of folks who moved here in the last couple of years, though. That they're all, a little bit more wealthy than perhaps others historically. So we have some, I mean, there's some diversity and some not. I think there's gonna be, I think it's interesting, the comment that Sherry Summer made about agreement. I think there are a lot of areas that the community will agree on, except the most contentious, is what I would say. And sometimes that's going to be there. I'm sort of expecting that. It's one of the reasons why I ran for council. It's one of the things that I think is very important. So I would say part of this process is I'd like for the community to come together as much as possible on the things that we agree on the things that may be a little more contentious, that we work through those in a respectful, civil way. We focus on, sort of, I don't know whether it's, fixing the problem or fixing the blame. That's not the real issue here, but it's a matter of sort of focusing on ideas and vision and steps, and what we want the city to look. So I think there is what I would say is, we've seen in years past, and I would say this isn't in the last year or 5 years or 10 or 20. I mean, it's a lot longer than that. Some fault lines in the community, and I'm not going to go over what I think those are, but I think if you touch certain things, people perk up and they have views, and people will state those views and will be very, very helpful to us. But there may be some tension as we go on in these various, in the public engagement, among council members, among, every single person who touches this, because we have a lot of smart and interested in that, invested people in Louisville. They care about their city. They love their city. All of us ran for election this fall. I bet I would venture to say that everybody recognizes that almost everybody loves Louisville who is here. There are people who I certainly talk to who have great concerns and are sort of really disillusioned. But I hope that this process will help to bring community to a community. That may be more idealistic than anything else, but I'd like to, one of my concerns is to heal some of the division that we've had in our city recently. And I hope this will be that kind of process. I mean, I hope that we'll be able to do that just by interacting with people, because different people across different parts of the city are going to be interacting with each other. They may never have interacted. Great. I hope that we can make something of that. In and of itself, I think that's very useful. But so I think that piece is important. I think another part, other than sort of the community building and working through tensions, sort of living in that tension, recognizing it's there, naming it at times, and working through it on various issues. I think another one is, from what we're calling it, it needs to be comprehensive. Many of you have already talked about aspects in which something can be comprehensive. Obviously, the whole city geographical, all of its various resources, all of its various people, just depending on how you want to slice that up. You can slice that up a whole bunch of different ways. But stakeholders here, there's a lot of stakeholders. Some of them are voters, but then there's kids. They're not voters. They're gonna be voters someday. We're gonna leave them out, of course not. There's business owners, many of whom live here, work here, have workers who are here, but many of them don't live here, don't work here. Own businesses that aren't here, we want them. There are people who would love to be here, but can't for whatever reason. I think of that sometimes in terms of some of our DEI goals. There are people who are very able to live here from an economic standpoint. They can buy houses here. They choose not to. Why is that? We want to go out and find some of those, and can't just be looking only within. But we do need to look within. We've got very old and, generational families. 5, 6 generations, we include them. All of these people and the suggestions that have been made to try to bring people out in a very safe way. And I don't know what that's gonna be. That's what you guys as consultants and staff will help to make sure it's right. For some, that's gonna be focus groups. For some, it's gonna be this or that. And that's so, that's a piece of it. How we define stakeholders, I think we need to define it very broad for different parts of the plan, not for all of it, but for parts of it. And I go back to, sort of environmental sustainability, the economic sustainability, social sustainability, those subjects we've covered before in other contexts and like the energy code context, I think are useful here too. And that's part of being comprehensive. I think recognizing big changes in our community, which the housing plan certainly does, but the fire, huge change. That's going to be something that the comprehensive plan ought to deal with. We can get into the subjects in just a minute, but being comprehensive means issues, people, and locations, and types of businesses, in ways we generate our revenue and ways we spend it will help to define some of that. The planning piece, I think Councilmember Hefner talked about that having actionable goals. I think one of the things that I would say from the past, immediately past comprehensive plan is it's hard sometimes to understand what certain parts of that comprehensive plan actually mean. It's one of the reasons why staff are important. It's one of the reasons why, developers and citizens and a whole host of other people need to be involved, but being able to look at the comprehensive plan and say, we can be proud of this document because we know that we can take steps in this direction. We've got this board and commission that we've kind of provided some guidance to maybe over time, that staff has some sense of where to go. The planning needs to have those ideas in a baked form, so that when we get to these meetings, people are not just sort of picking and choosing, that there's a little more meat to the bone. So I don't know, I think that's part of the planning piece. That's part of the success for me is that the actionable by all of us, and that everybody can have some expectations around that. I don't know whether there are other, the comments that were made before, just great. That we need to to emphasize to people that this is something it's gonna be around for a while. And so that trying to create in the community expectations about what this is. What is this? In council, we will have in a little over a week, 4 members of the 7 who've been involved in council, I think, less than a year. That, to me, is cool, because there's gonna be a lot of new ideas. There's good, but it is new, and nobody, except, I guess, for me, has been through, as a council member, part of the process, but I haven't been through the whole process either. I've been through 2 small area plans. When I said comprehensive a moment ago, I forgot a comment that the summer made, which is, it's good to have the whole thing in one shot. I think we learned the last time, it was really hard to split off small area plans. And I think if we can do the whole piece, it's going to help us in so many ways.
So what do you mean, like, not, I mean, explain that more.
Well,
Don't we have?
others can explain it too, but I think it is possible, because we did it before, to get as much done as we can and then say, we're not quite ready, we're not quite baked on a couple of these issues, big issues, in town. One had to do with South Boulder Road, one had to do with Caslin. Those are 2 really important areas. I'd hate for us to set that apart and say, we're gonna do those down the road. And I think that's part of being comprehensive about what we do. And I don't think there's any.
You might address the different areas separately, but during the same process.
Exactly.
Okay,
So when you have a comprehensive plan coming out of it, it's one that covers the
Got
whole.
it.
So anyway, those are some thoughts, but I agree about including the fiscal responsibility, the groups that we've talked about, kids and adults alike. All of the things that we've spoken about sort of generally have been really good comments. I don't have, except for the comment about wanting to make sure we include people outside Louisville in an appropriate way. I think, and that's an interesting thing that we've surfaced a little bit, right? There's a kind of maybe a little bit of a tension there. But who knows? Maybe not. Other comments said a lot.
I like your idea though of focusing, like having certain focus areas within the comprehensive plan. But yet it's still part of one conversation, finding it together, because I think some residents may have more ideas, maybe they've given more thought to one particular area than another. And ideas for, I'll just use your exact example for McCaslin, may not in any way apply to the same thing we do on South Boulder. So I like the fact that people, and there might be somebody who has great ideas on each of them, or many somebody's, right? So that would be good. I don't know if it's possible or beneficial if there's a way for us to identify, like more of a youth input versus what, like Louisville adult residents versus business contributions. So because the perspective, right, is interesting to understand that it's not a collective, it's these groups kind of look at it in this way and for why. This group looks at another. The business is gonna have a different perspective on how they would like to see the plan laid out. And I think for us, for me, it would be helpful as we're going through it to gauge that and understand where those ideas are coming from in a group. If anybody else disagrees, please feel free to comment. Yeah, the other thought I had was, when we go through the engagement process, and I think this was on something you said, Chris, sparked this in me, is that, is there a way that we could put ideas out there for people? Because, sometimes that can solicit more engagement, is like, hey, here's like 3 possible ideas for what we could be doing on South Boulder. And somebody might be like, no, I don't like any of those, but that makes me think, would that be something that would help kind of, rather than just a blank piece of paper essentially that people have to walk up to? I'm trying to find ways to our mayor's point, make it so that people understand what this is for and why it's for them, the city of Louisville, the people who live here as well as the businesses. And how do we get more of that?
Other comments about success? What success looks like here. I actually do want some feedback from staff and the consultants about some of these things, because they may be able to help us. I mean, we have at least we have a framework that they have shared with us. It's, it has the general pieces and the sorts of ways that we're gonna engage. So some of that framework is there. And I think as we get into this, if you have, and if the public has comments about, gee, I liked some of this and I didn't like in terms of the framework, they can provide more information. But I guess I would like, in terms of any of the framework, is there any part of the framework that you consider to be, relevant to the success, your view of success of the project? And I didn't mean to interrupt, Councilmember Hamilton, you may have had another question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it'd be helpful to throw up the framework or have some sort of context of what exactly you're referring to, but,
I'm talking about their scope of services a bit,
okay.
which was in the packet. And that may be drilling down a little bit too much, but there's pieces in there about what their deliverables are. There's pieces in there about the engagement windows. I mean, we can bring up specific parts. Jeff can bring back up, I think, the very general parts of the framework. And if there are parts of that that feed into what you consider to be successful.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm?
Yep, I guess, before we dive into that,
Yeah.
one thing that I think would be important to success is, how the final end product is consumed. I think having a large single document, hundreds of pages, can be really hard to sort through. Not just staff and council members, but I'm just thinking of prior conversations we just had about how our residents consume information that we try to put out there. So I don't have a solution, but I'm throwing it out there. I think there's some creative ways that we can maybe elevate that in this round.
That's a great suggestion. And it's true, I think we've learned in the past couple of years from even council members learn in different ways. The community is gonna learn in different ways, and they're gonna consume it in different ways too. But just like you're saying, it's not limited to the consumption of that, and I hope that the consultants are aware and attentive, and staff as well. Because, yeah, I mean, what we have, when we talk about comprehensive plan, we've got that big document, with the spiral, and there may be a need for that. Obviously, there's gonna be some need for that. But are there other ways that the community can consume that, have a sense of what this actually means, what it looks like? I mean, three-dimensional stuff, CAD technology and all that, whatever technologies you use. And we've got great stuff, and I'm sure the consultants have great stuff to help illustrate, but not just sort of two-dimensional, maybe three-dimensional, maybe, drone footage. And just the kind of stuff which is gonna resonate with some people, maybe not others, but it's gonna breathe this alive. And it kind of goes back to what Councilman Kern said about making this fun too.
Yeah, and I'm
Right.
thinking, I guess I said residents specifically, but also this is a really useful document that we want to make sure our boards and commissions can sort through and ensure that their ideas and recommendations align with it. When we have a developer come in or someone who's trying to build, something new in the area, just to your point earlier, there's some us versus them dynamic circulating around, and could this be an opportunity to try and help overcome that by making this easily consumable to different groups instead of a 200-page PDF, right? Kind of thing. We have that as a place for it, but I think we're kind of past that now. So I'll leave it at that. The expert can sort of the details.
I think that does go though to the actionability of it. That, you really want that to be something that people can point to, because we have these discussions, right, on big projects. Particularly big land use projects, and part of the number of the factors, they always point back to the comprehensive plan. It's never that we used to skip that part, right? And so these things are really important. And people ought to be able to look at them and understand what they mean. Just like, I don't have to say more than that, but I think that's, that's a good, these are really good ideas. Other ideas that people have about success before I'm just suggesting that we look back at a couple of pieces of their framework. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. I just want to make sure that if you have questions about that piece, we can ask them. If you have, thoughts about what success looks like, based on the structure of what they're going to be looking at, that might be helpful. But in the meantime, are there other comments just based on what we had so far? Yeah, Councilmember Kirk.
Is there an aesthetic, assuming that there is, but I shouldn't assume anything, an aesthetic component, like with our transportation plan, like the Highway 42 project, it was a lot of it too, wasn't just about flow and use, but it was how it would look, how it would appear. We got rid of ash trees because of the bugs that can get into them and kill them and make them look ugly. And so we're replacing them, putting new stuff, making things look beautiful. Is part of that too going to be not just what residents would like to see where and how their city flows, but how it feels when they're in it, using it, walking, biking, driving? That's a part of this, and it can be an expensive part, right? But that this would be part of that comprehensive plan. So as a developer comes in, they hear, they can see what the residents have said, we would like it to feel like this. So please don't present something that's a 180 from what we just spent a year and a half telling you that we like. I didn't know if there was, I didn't see in the proposal anything like that, but I know in other communities, Telluride's a good example. That's a big part of it for them, is that feeling that you get while you're there and consuming their product, their city, if you will. And I wanted to make sure that that was in for us, and our residents would get a say in that too, what that looks and feels like. Does that need more vegetation? So therefore the consequence is potentially more water use to water trees. We should know that, or whatever else. It's complex, but I think maybe a component that could be added in.
Is that part of that lower bubble, it's like the arts bubble?
Is that-
I thought we did talk about that.
I think it's good. What,
Jeff?
trying to pull it inside.
I saw it and I thought maybe they were only in their mindset, like referring to like the look and feel of Old Town, and there's a lot more to the look and feel of Louisville than just Main Street.
Oh, of course.
So, yeah.
I mean, I can say based on knowledge previous to, or in comp plans in the past, but also in these ones that I participated, there's a lot of discussion. A lot about look and feel. A lot.
And then to Councilmember Hopper's point, how much of that last comp plan in the look and feel was actually acted on? So
That may be hold on, can you two talk about that for just a second? Relating to the
Yeah.
actionability,
Relating to what?
to actionability, I mean, I think. that's
Right,
kind of
right,
what you-
yeah. I think some of the things that came out of the last comp plan were to update commercial and industrial design standards. That is something that we didn't complete over the last 10 years, but I think there's been a call to do that. So that's something we would look at again with this comprehensive plan. Is that going to be an action item? I would say the existing comprehensive plan outside of that, there's a lot of transportation improvements that were called for. We kind of took that to another state with the transportation master plan. We have implemented a lot of the transportation master plan. Public Works has done a great job, kind of taking that document and implementing a lot of traffic calming. Highway 42 improvements are well underway. Pine Street improvements is a major example of one of the high priority items. So I would say from a look and feel standpoint, there was a big focus on transportation with the last comprehensive plan that has been implemented over the last several years. The last comprehensive plan and small area plans did not have a call for significant land use changes. So we didn't initiate any land use changes through the comprehensive plan. So I'd say that the one thing, transportation, we did a lot. Design standards, we didn't get where we wanted to be over the last 10 years, but that's something that's could get revitalized with this plan.
I would also add that I would think and expect that part of sort of these early vision and values discussions is an expression of that aesthetic in some sense. So we may get it at a high level, and then policies, we can sort of build off of that, right? In terms of, I think you mentioned the more granular look, or somebody mentioned a granular look at specific areas of town. So you can start to parse it out a bit, and do a deeper dive on what people mean when they say certain keywords about community aesthetic. Yeah, to build off what Rob said, it's definitely going to be part of the conversation. And feel free to chime in, Jessica or Allison, but that's definitely in their wheelhouse too, in terms of they're very good at urban design and graphics and visualization, all that stuff, coupled with the community engagement experience. Yeah.
And I would just say, the role of the city is a regulator too. Like, we're not out there designing development. So we have a very unique role where we're trying to create standards and processes that a private developer is actually going to have to be working to implement those with the city and the city staff and the city council. So it is in a way, something that we're not doing alone usually. And I'm like, very rarely does the city actually go in and control a development like that. So I think we also need to realize what the city controls and what the city doesn't. And like the best tools to do that, which zoning is, it's not a really precise tool all the time. And so having good processes where you can bring a partner in, it's not a partner, but where a developer can come in and have confidence that they understand what the city wants. You're going to get a developer that's going to come in. If we define our vision and actually put it in our codes, we're much more likely to get a developer that's going to come in and implement that vision. Where things are unsure or unknown, you're much less likely to get a developer to come in, because that's a huge risk for them financially. So that's something that we're looking at from an economic vitality as well as a community design standpoint, is how can we better articulate and provide predictability on both community expectations and the developers that are going to come in.
That's a very good point. One of the things that triggered in my thought is this is an educational process too. It really is. So, part of the measure, I think, of success to me is that the community understands not just what this is about, but some of the lingo that gets used, not the charrette word. Can't use this.
We have 5 charrettes planned.
Yeah, we're not gonna do charrette, we're gonna do something, we're gonna call it something different than that. But I think helping people understand what tools we have, I think will be a really good thing. And people of all ages, what we can and can't control, we set the table. Other people cook the food and put it on the table and put the other stuff on there with it. And understanding what our limitations are sometimes it makes people unhappy. Sometimes it makes people very happy that we don't control certain things, but I think that's part of the role of this process. That's, when I say that this is a community building piece, I think it's community knowledge too. A very well-educated community. And it's good, I mean, they can handle information gets thrown to them, but you've gotta inform people, you know, so anyway, other things about the success based on what we just talked about here. Let's just look quickly, if it's okay, at, you know, there was, I thought, something a little bit more about the windows specifically. And I may be wrong, and if I am, well, it's the vision, I'm looking at one of the slides about it, the engagement window of vision and values. A second engagement window being choices and framework, a third one being a draft plan, and the kind of, it's really that, let's maybe start with the slide just before this last one. Pardon me?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the back.
Page.
Oh, sorry, I think it's page
7?
6 and 7. It's 7, I
Slides.
think that's right.
It's
on, yeah, that's not right, I'm sorry, 34. May or may not be, it's just a table. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's, we're going up more later.
Because we had a little, I mean, we had a presentation on this part. I kind of want to check in with you about, to be more specific, I'm not trying to be obtuse, I'm trying to be to leave a little bit for folks to feedback on, but this, can we put up that slide? Page 34, it's called schedule. We're doing it, okay. Got the speaker's notes there. There we go. Okay. I mean, we've been through and talked about, we've got a presentation from staff about, and a little bit from the consultant around these different pieces of what we have, and there's material in the packet itself. In response to what Jeff presented to us before, are we comfortable about these engagement windows and the sort of the general structure of the process and the timing of the process in terms of being able to say in the end that this is going to be a success? Do we see anything now in this that conflicts with your own definition of success or the one we're working on? Yes.
I would like to actually ask about the focus group piece of this, because I don't know if it applies to Q1, if it applies to stuff that's happening in Q2, the draft plan framework. I would just be curious to know, what are those focus groups? What are they going to be involved in? And I agree, how are we selecting people for those?
And maybe what we can do is when we get responses, that's a good question to be asked. If that's okay, it's a good point. I'm maybe asking it at a higher level than that. Not so much, but the question being good to ask, I'm just asking among us, do we see or hear anything in the presentation so far that suggests that wait a second, that should be before this, or this should be before that, or why is this gonna take 18 months? I mean, those are all good potential questions, but yeah.
Thank you for asking this question. My answer is, I don't know, because I've never done this before. And I would lean on the experts who have navigated this, or consultants with other municipalities, our, planning leaders in the room, does this to you look like what success would be as far as engagement goes for our city? Cause I would just be making stuff up if I said Google order, I don't know.
If I could just start adding into it, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it, to start with. So I think we're trying to do what we think is best, considering, what we think what will be the most successful to the community. We also have a budget. We have time, the consultants have limited time, staff has limited time, but this is our highest priority, our biggest project. So I don't want to say but we put together a plan that we felt using our budget and our time and our resources was the most robust that we could come up with. We're still developing some of the details on, the structure. We had some ideas about, how do we work with planning commission and city council? Right now, we're focusing on planning commission, by the code, they play a huge role in developing the plan and recommending a final plan to city council. So they're kind of be our oversight group is planning commission, but we're doing broad engagement with the community. There's a specific question about focus groups. So we created focus groups that were staff and expert local focus groups, but also included residents and community members, as well as business owners and stakeholders and property owners. So we had, I don't know, I don't have the exact number, but we have pretty massive list, and we actually have done that engagement, which was initial focus group engagement. They were one-on-one conversations and small group conversations with, again, residents, city staff members, business owners, property owners, on the development. Now, that's just a small part of the bigger plan. If you go to the slide that actually had kind of those elements of the public engagement, this one here, no, go up one more. So, sorry, the one you just had for that. So one of the things that we need to reinitiate that we haven't done yet, I would say, is a business and an EDI focus group. So we're gonna put some thought into, we don't have the exact structure yet. I'd say maybe some like round table type stuff with those types of groups. The public events and the Engage Louisville online engagement and the surveys, those are probably where we'll put, and the intercept events, like 4, 5, and 6 is actually where I think we'll put the most time and effort into engaging with folks. These are the big public open houses. This is where we're out meeting people at community events. I mean, there's a lot of time and energy that goes into 4, 5, and 6. It's not that number 3 isn't as important, but that's kind of like a limited, hey, let's sit down and see what your issues are based on your area of expertise. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I actually might see if our consultants want to weigh in. Jessica or Allison, just could they do this work around the country and they know our community in the sense of how much we care about it and care about engagement. So Jessica, if you or Allison want to chime in on the engagement plan as it relates to your experience in other communities and how you feel that you'd be a good fit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would maybe echo what Rob said, is that each of these that are on the slide are really key inputs to the process. We really feel as a consultant team that it is important that a broad spectrum of the community have their fingerprints on this plan. This is the City of Louisville's plan. This is not Design Workshop's plan. And so we do that by integrating community engagement throughout the entire process. So focus groups, as an example, those are really helping us learn more about the City of Louisville, setting the stage and starting to hear some of the initial ideas, concerns, opportunity from some key experts and community members. We did hold 11 of those, either kind of one-on-one conversations or group conversations at the end of 2023. And they created just such a robust set of information for us to then help start to craft a survey and start to think about what are our more public events that we really want to make sure we're hearing from the entire community on. And so they are an important piece, but there maybe is less focus, as Rob said, in terms of the time and the effort when compared to the more public events, using the Engage Louisville website, using our surveys, and having kind of intercept or pop-up events, because that's where we think we will really be able to engage with more people. Some of the comments today, I really enjoyed hearing in terms of, there's some folks who are really heavily involved, but there's also folks who are we don't always hear from in these types of processes. And so by using engagement windows and using this mix of online engagement opportunities, in person, come to us, in person where we go to other people, surveys, that helps us really just build a more robust engagement process. And we're hearing from more people within the community. And we are also able to track who we're hearing from, so that you have that information when you're making decisions and when the Planning Commission has that information as well.
Okay, that's very helpful. I think what I'll say with this particular topic is you all have put a ton of thought and effort into this proposed schedule. It even says in parentheses, subject to change. I don't have the expertise or knowledge to make informed suggestions. So I'm supportive with moving forward with what's here right now, knowing all the thought that you put into it. I think this is like very granular detail that maybe that's left to the experts.
I'll say also, we'll remain open to adapting and being flexible. Like if certain things we find aren't working, we'll stay open to that. So.
I would just want to say, I also like the schedule as it's set up, with one question is if there could be something in Q2 or 3, because that's when street fair is and the farmer's market is, and those in-person things could, you have a booth or table at these events.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the schedule is not intended to be super rigid in the sense of like, we're not saying engagement will only occur during these specific periods. I think that it will occur throughout. So it's a great point, and we want to be opportunistic about what we can use that, obviously. So
one of the things I was gonna also emphasize to your point, Councilmember Pennington, because like you, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in putting the structure together or the particular inputs and so forth. I think it's important to be transparent about what you learn out of them. That's one thing I think would be helpful. And I think I just heard a comment about that in terms of, being able to keep track of who's involved and who, provided that input and so forth, be able to comment on it. But one of the things I think is important is there are going to be check-ins with us. This is in with the community. It isn't just on process, because one of the problems right now is we're not into this yet, right? We're looking at something cold. None of us have been through the full comprehensive plan process on council. Anyway, others, staff have, but for us, the stuff is new, and we're going to get comments from the public about some of these kinds of engagements, maybe like it, not like it, suggestions. How do people gonna deal with that? I mean, is that something that we'll probably get some of that input, but staff will too, I suppose. Should we get a hold of you on that as we go, and I'm speaking in terms of sort of general structure.
So make sure I understand the question. Is it, are you referring to if you're getting feedback from the community that they have suggestions for engagement? So, hey, I don't like how these flyers look or those types of things. That's what you're, or.
Yeah, I mean, just input.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, again, we're dealing with experts who've done this before, and I don't wanna suggest that, I mean, there's a certain structure that they're working from. It is our plan, but it's a little bit of structure, I mean, they have to have some structure. But there's gonna be some feedback, and we'll have feedback, planning commission will have feedback, staff will have feedback, but the community will need, they just are gonna have some feedback too. And that's, I guess I'm sort of thinking ahead to some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Jessica, but I think, one of the sort of deliverables out of this project will be sort of almost like a data dump of all the things that we've heard, right? There'll be a distillation of it in the plan in terms of themes and data and all that kind of stuff, but I would imagine there'll be an addendum that's just a dump of all the survey responses, for example, that we get, with no names attached, things like that. So you can go as deep as you want. To your point of like a user-friendly document, like, should be like a sort of a short, relatively concise, however that looks, document that's digestible, user-friendly, but I think there'll be all kinds of addendums that you can go as deep as you want and hear what everybody said about everything. So transparency is gonna be front and center and important, and like I said, we'll also be adaptable and flexible with our strategies, and we find that some are working better than others.
And in some of these, I recognize, and this is important for people, some of these are public meetings, noticed, and there's input, and so some of them are not. And that's the way these kinds of engagements go, and putting them together, knowing what comes out of them, very important for people to evaluate and refer to. But I think it's important to know that there isn't, there's not public comment on every single thing, but I think that, there are gonna be comments on some parts of the process that you may get, and it sounds like they can get in touch with you. You can work that however you're going to with the experts and bring it back. Are there, I mean, I don't hear any more sort of about the kind of structures getting in the way or not. I think your comment about the timing of some of that engagement is really important. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a great conversation. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that the council has as far as this conversation about engagement. And I just wanted to say that from the conversations that I've had with Rob, Jeff, and to some degree the consultants, I feel like what you're talking about is what they have been talking about as well. I think that they've got some great ideas as far as pulling these engagement pieces together. And I know I sat in on the interviews with the consultants, and for me, one of the real decision factors with this group was that they are really passionate about community engagement. It's so important, as you all are talking about. So that's, to me, why I think a big reason why we brought these folks to the table. And I would just caution you that this is gonna be a long process. There's gonna be a lot of different conversations that Jeff and Rob are talking about. And no process like this is ever perfect. And I think, if council has concerns as we're going along, please, share those with our team. And I would just caution that, if we try to respond to every, community member concern, like I'd really like to have another meeting about this, another meeting about that. We're already a year behind schedule on this. And like Mayor and I, we've talked about that, this is gonna take a long time to get through this process. I would just caution, like, making sure that we don't take this 4-year process. We really need to get through this process in a reasonable time, while also having a lot of engagement and all the other things that are involved in the process. And at some point, I think, maybe as you get past the second question, I'd love to hear, from Rob and Jeff and maybe the consultants, like, what your takeaways are from this conversation, because I think what I've been hearing from you guys really aligns with what they've been talking about here. So I just want to keep that.
Yeah, I think that would be, I'd like to hear that about first, I guess I'd like to hear the consultants have feedback as well, but And I would like to hear what your takeaways are. I'm glad to do some of that, but I think we've kind of, I don't know that there's any dissent from any of the ideas that we talked about. They're just sort of cumulative and additive. I don't know that does anybody feel differently? Yes, no?
I actually have two things I'd like to say, two questions I'd like to ask. So, you were asking about the schedule and the timing. I agree with Councilman Fahey, and that's what I was thinking too, that I think the number one opportunity for engagement is not during the cold months, but during the warm months. People are out, they're active, they're about, and they're interested in engaging. The colder it gets, the longer they're inside, the less you're gonna get people to show up for things. And so I'd like to see actually this come closer into into Q2 and Q3 versus, asking people to be involved now and in February and then not again until like October, November. So that'd be awesome. I think we'll be likely to have more involvement. Then the other thing I wanted to know for myself, and maybe you guys already know the answer, but I think a lot of residents probably don't. What does it mean when you're asking us vision and values versus coming back and saying choices and plan framework? And it looks like there's going to be about 6 months for staff to be kind of working on some of this, the draft plan framework piece of it. So are you pulling from some of the information from vision and values that residents are providing? Are you doing it at the same time and then coming to them? I was just curious to know, what is it that you want? Because a 6-month window for people to go, oh, I engaged, now you're going to engage again. What is it that you want from me? I'd like to know, I think they do too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So, yeah, I mean, the initial engagement, like we said, is intended to be geared toward the vision and values type discussion. So there'll be questions, targeted questions, sort of like, what do you value most kinds of questions? And so we'll get data from that engagement, and it'll be the consultant's team job and our job is to synthesize and sort of distill that down and what the common themes are. And then from that, we don't know yet what we'll share, obviously, later in the year. We want that to be driven by community input, but it will essentially be, correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica, but sort of a framework for the plan, sort of like, almost like, hey, community, this is what we heard. Here are some of the key issues that we need to get your feedback on. Whatever those are, I don't even want to speculate because we don't know yet. Are specific land use changes at certain locations, scenarios, trade-off type discussions, granular sort of like focused geographic areas of the city. Let's drill down on the Casland or downtown, Old Town. It's all, I think, on the table, but intended to be driven by the vision and values discussion. We want to hear from that. So yeah, I guess the answer is we don't know yet, but the idea is there'll be themes that come out of the community input that will drive that discussion. And again, we'll be coming back to you. I think we don't have the specific dates yet, but our plan and our idea is to come back to council and others, planning commission, after these engagement windows, right? Report back on what we've heard and sort of what our plan is going forward and what we're kind of looking forward in terms of key issues and questions we want to ask community about.
So it sounds like it is a critical engagement point, because it's just when somebody just reads this and goes, oh, it's vision and value, I want to be involved in like the planning piece. But it sounds like there's a very big component of what the planning piece is going to look like if people can take the time to engage on vision and value. Yes?
Yeah, that's why we're doing our best to resource kind of this ramp up period. So as as many people as possible are aware that this is coming. So they have adequate notice and time to kind of process what this is, why it matters, why it's important versus the, 2 weeks notice for an upcoming open house. And they're like, what is this again? So that's a big priority for us to get as many people as possible in the beginning.
If I may. I'll just.
Yes. Good.
I was just gonna add a key point is engagement builds off of itself. And so it is, I think as you're speaking in the room, I just want to maybe reiterate, engaging in that vision and values conversation helps lay the groundwork for what we will come back in terms of this is maybe a policy statement related to housing or transportation or environmental sustainability. This is what a future land use framework looks like, and getting into some of the more nitty-gritty details of where do we want to see different types of housing, where do we want to see different types of businesses, how do we support existing businesses. So it is so important that we have the time and use multiple methods to get feedback in that vision and values phase, because that really does lay the groundwork for the rest of the content in the plan to make sure that it is actionable and implementable.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Rob, as I said before, do you want to talk about takeaways?
Yeah, I think it'd be great that Jessica, Jeff, I was gonna start with the number one thing I heard was no charrettes. Got that. So we'll,
Don't call them charrettes.
No, I
Use it.
yeah.
Don't call it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in all seriousness, I think one of the biggest things I heard was, you know, community engagement is incredibly critical. Like, you cannot create a community plan, you all reflected that without good community engagement. It's not gonna be, you're not gonna have buy-in on the plan, it's not gonna be a credible plan. You have to get the engagement and you have to show that you've heard the engagement. So we have to be transparent with, here's everything we heard, and then when the plan is developed, you know, you're gonna have to be able to see the link between the engagement and the input and the actual outcome of the plan. So I think, you know, everything, you know, we have to get that right, in the beginning. So I think that's the biggest takeaway that I had. I'll let Jeff and Jessica speak to it also.
Yeah, I'll go second, Jessica. So definitely hearing the theme about public input being critical. And the nuance there being that we need to do it in a really thoughtful way that sort of resources it, where we are hearing from as many voices in the community as possible. And we're balancing those voices, which are going to not agree with each other necessarily, but we at least look at them on balance, have a plan that reflects the balance of input we've gotten from the range of stakeholders we need to hear from. And also the theme of it being actionable. I think there's actually a lot to unpack there in terms of not only like clear, concise, sort of de-jargoned language and structure of the plan that someone can pick up 5 years from now and knows nothing about planning and knows, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. But also, you know, just sort of that clear action plan that I think a lot of plans, and Jessica probably could speak to this better than me, but a lot of companies end up with this like giant laundry list of things to do. You know, there's like 200 things we're supposed to do in the next 500 years. I would be hopeful that we could be more thoughtful and condense that down and make it so it's something more digestible and understandable, so we can have a roadmap after the plan is adopted and not sort of shortchange that post-adoption period. That's really important to keep the momentum going and focus on resourcing that as well. And Jessica, whatever you'd like to add.
Yeah, I think that you both did such a good job describing some high level takeaways that I'm not sure I have anything to add there, but there's a tactical piece that I heard tonight that is really helpful for us as we're starting to craft some of the engagement opportunities, is that information needs to be really digestible and clear, that we need to be thinking about the jargon and the terms that we're using and providing kind of clear information in regular words to describe what we're talking about, to enable the community to engage. That tracking who we are engaging with is really important.
Yeah.
So making sure we understand who we're hearing from and tracking that engagement. So those are some of the things that are more on that tactical side, but will really help us make sure that we're doing a good job, that this engagement is fun and people want to come and share their opinion rather than feeling like it's another meeting or, you know, another to do. So it really, really wonderful conversation, and just appreciate the focus and genuineness of wanting to hear from everyone in the community.
The library will. Yeah. Yes.
So I was gonna share earlier that we were talking about the importance of vision piece. I'll tell you, and you know, sort of a wonky nerd in here who's excited about this whole process. I'm really excited about the vision part of this. Checking back in with the community on our vision and values. Because that's gonna reinforce a lot of the other work we do as a city. We look at your work plan next year, we'll come back to the vision and values, we think about KPIs, and think about budget priorities, we'll have that recent vision and values so you can check into. So I think that's a really crucial part of this that we use in a lot of places throughout the city.
Very good point. I would say in kind of response to that, one of the things that is, I wonder whether some of the vision, I mean, the vision and values without the more specific ways in which we're interpreting and applying them in the conference plan is not very helpful to the policymakers and the reviewers, planning commission, staff, I think, I want to speak for staff, but I think having been on the planning commission, I think having the vision and values is very important, I'm not suggesting otherwise, but I also think when the rubber meets the road and people have to make decisions, it's very important to be able to have those items that are going to be far more gritty and detailed to be able to do that. At least that's my impression, hearing both community members, applicants, and I know I've heard that from staff too. When we ask them, well, what about this factor? What about that factor? It's like, well, it sort of means this, but interpreted this way, you know, that's the only concern that I have about that. And I trust the experts here to be able to do that in the right way. I mean, they're undoubtedly have had people feedback to them about the ways they've done this. So if they don't do it this way, you know, or some way that is hopefully actionable, I probably heard it plenty to avoid those problems. That's just my comment. Other comments on the takeaways?
There is there time for another public comment?
You know, not on our current agenda. I want,
Well, we're talking about public engagement, and there are people here who want to engage.
what I think I'd like to do before we get into the second. We sort of think about that, we need to talk about that. I need a little bit of advice from our staff. I appreciate the concern and the desire to engage about some of the things that we talked about. Let's take a 5-minute break. We're almost at 8 o'clock, and then we'll get to the second question and so forth. I want to kind of do our first check-in. We only have one thing on the table, so you know, we have the second question and then council direction and discussion that are on the agenda. Let's take a 5-minute break. gavel tonight, but we're gaveling back. My dog would go nuts if I knew you were here. All right. I want to address there was a quick comment about his departure, and I appreciate that, and others, not just his departure, about public comment. And I want to kind of address that right now. There certainly was a suggestion last night in the meeting that we had that maybe we consider modifying the structure of the meetings. What I'll cut to the chase, we're not going to make the change tonight. We don't make changes on the fly regardless without thinking about it. This is a council introduction. And I think the comments that we made at the beginning were enormously helpful, and I think we and the staff and the experts that we're hiring have just, discussed them. Part of the problem, and this comes up at least with tonight's agenda, we'll work through the other issue, but we have an agenda that was published. And it had a place for public comment. For the people who have been on, there've been people who were there and wanted to hear the public comments, may not come back after that. Publicly, we don't make rules, for better or worse, we don't make rules based on even the pressure which I feel myself to want to get additional information. The way that the public can provide that information, that's one of the reasons why I raised that issue, is because if the public has questions about the structure of this, I want them to be able to provide that input by emailing staff, and if need be, staff will provide that. But I think it may beg the larger question of, do we want to do something different about public comment? That there are, and staff has certainly had input and thoughts about this. We don't change the agenda on the fly around this, because we may need to do that the next time. I recognize that. And there are a whole host of unintended consequences, some of which well, just by the definition, I don't know them, and neither do the rest of us. Staff can help us with that, and then we can address it as we go forward. But we can't change the course of the river as we're going down it. So that's the short answer. It may not be satisfying to the people here, or even the ones who are left online, but it's not fair to the people who aren't here or the people who left early to change the public input portion of it. So those are, pardon me. Oh, so that's what I would, that's for how it respond to the concern. And I very much, though, appreciate the concern that you're raising. Because, and to the extent that you want to talk with council members after, I think after this meeting, remember, this is just an introduction. This is a very beginning stage. And if you have questions for council or concerns, we can talk with you about them and relay them as we go forward. Second question, which was in the packet, at the very end of the packet, available for folks to respond to, is what the top 3 issues the project should address are. So why don't we start with that, council members? What are the top three in your view? Yes. Councilmember.
I would go with, sustainability, community, and probably, the,
Now, can I ask a question?
sure.
Clarifying the question, say a little more about the issue of community and how that translates for the people who are working in this.
Okay, it would be, implementing the the carbon decarbonization plan for the city. It would be, influencing new construction that's green or, fire mitigation efforts. It would be in disaster preparedness and prevention. It would be anything that would, even dealing with the leaded fuel from the airplanes. Anything that's gonna impact the air quality or climate change.
What about the other EDI? I think
EDI, I think is really important. I think that should be a part, well, we've said already, it should be a part of every decision we make in the city. And I would like to make sure that that includes the normal things that people think about with EDI are things like race and ethnicity, things, economic variances. But it's also the aging population, it's also the youth. There's so many different ways that people can be prevented from achieving their potential. And with people with disabilities, there's just so many different things, and all of those things need to be considered in all of the decisions that we make in the city.
others. Member Pro Tem.
Yeah, I agree with all those, Deb, I think those are fantastic. You know, three's three, I could say two or four or three or whatever, but I think, you know, affordable housing for me is definitely, you know, a top priority for the next 20 years. And it translates to lots of those other issues, the environment and economic vitality and EDI, but so affordable housing for me doesn't solve all of it, but it's a major component of all those things. Transportation, and specifically, I think, you know, more, the transportation master plan is fantastic, and continue to implement that, especially around pedestrian friendly things. You've seen a couple of efforts to change roads, and thinking about, you know, what other things, again, partly living, for 5 months in Rwanda, and walking everywhere at all times in a capital city of millions of people and very, very few cars. There's a world that's pedestrian friendly. And we have a way of building that with better bike paths and underpasses and sidewalks and EV paths, the electric bike paths, so I meant, e-bike paths, there it is. So I think transportation is super important, but I'm meaning less around, you know, we need a highway through our town, you know, that would be something that we really need to get a lot of traffic through our town. That's not what I'm focused on. And then, economic vitality, just in general, that it is in some ways it's not sexy, but there are two things. One, I think I'll continue to talk about businesses as amenities. So I think having a vibrant business community that our residents can enjoy those businesses, and enjoy the city they live in for the businesses that are available to them. And then all these things we care about start with having a fiscally solid city. And so having a vibrant economic community helps us implement all these other things we're talking about. So those would be my main three, and sort of like EDI runs through everything. For me, the environment runs through everything. So I don't want to leave that out. So that'd be my fourth, but I think it kind of runs through everything.
Good, thank you. Councilmember Hatt.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of Councilor Dickinson's, I'll start where you left off, I think identifying, planning and maybe planning impediments to the kind of economic development we want and the kind of economic growth we want would be key. I think that's one way that we can get out of this. Two would be housing. How do we enable housing? How do we frankly legalize housing? In places where it's not right now, legalize. And three would be transportation. So I rely on a lot, and I also need transportation. Partly in the road sense because, you know, most of us drive. But largely some of the goals, I think of the transportation master plan is, I think Kurt is just like version 1.0, and we've already moved beyond it, and there's more to do. And I hope that the comp plan can be part of that, sort of moving into, you know, version 2.0, or whatever number we're on. Sort of the trail network of the future, the pedestrian network of the future, the 15-minute city, you know, there's a lot of different terms for it, but finding a way to make it, I mean, it ties back to the economics piece and it ties back to the housing piece as well.
Thank you. Others?
I mean, they've already summarized my top priorities, the umbrellas, and then added the details of their need. So I don't really have any.
I'm sorry, I missed.
They are like, Councilmember Dickinson highlighted the three umbrellas basically that I would have mentioned as well. And then Councilmember Hefner fleshed out some more details under each of those umbrellas and how they're intertwined. So I don't have anything to add to that.
Thank you. I do agree. Yeah, well done, all three of you, actually. I do agree, I think, the transportation component of this beyond, you know, big broad topic of trains coming through, improved, public transportation. But on a like day-to-day living in Louisville transportation level, it is making our roads easier. If, you know, if we have like massive congested areas, I'd like to hear that in this process with our residents. It's a great opportunity for them to comment, like maybe there are members of our community who never drive Dillon, and there are members who drive it every day. They're like, 4:30, can't drive it. It's like bumper to bumper from public to 88. So that kind of information would, I think, be valuable for a comprehensive plan. I also think with the transportation piece, there's something to be said for when people take their car and drive someplace, that once they're there, there's breathable spaces. I don't know, I mean, I used to call it green spaces, but that means something different now. So breathable spaces, there are trees, clean the air, you can sit. It's not just drive someplace, go, get back in the car, drive someplace, go. I would like to see an engagement in that kind of thing. The aging population, this goes to Councilmember Bates, public housing and everything. We really have an aging population in Louisville, and it is lovely. I think we need to focus on where people can move if they no longer want to stay in their larger family homes, if they raise their kids. I think that's a solution I'd love to see addressed and worked on. And just acknowledging that we should have a community that incorporates even more than we already do, which it is lovely, but really embraces those people that they may have like some mobility issues that the 30-somethings don't have. So I'd like to make sure that that's part of the mindset. And I could never improve on what Councilmember Dickinson said about economic vitality. I agreed with the vibrant businesses that residents can enjoy. Yeah.
Good. A lot of really good comments so far. I would maybe flesh out the housing piece just a little bit. Because we talk about affordable housing. And of course, that means different things to different people. I think one of the things I want to make sure that we cover is the permanently affordable housing that community goal 12%. And that's a commitment we've made to other communities in our in our county, and I want to make sure that that's a piece of it. And I don't know, I think that's what Councilmember Dickinson was referring to, but it's not. What I want to add to that, and he can suggest whether it is or is not consistent, but there's the missing middle. And we hear a lot about it, about, achievable housing, workforce housing. I think there's been plenty of sentiment in the community about the fact that people who work with our kids, who serve us in the hospital and many other places can't afford to live here. And that's, it's, again, it may be intentional with other kinds of housing. It may be intention with other kinds of values that the community thinks are really important. But I think those kind of housing is really important too. And there are folks who just say more housing, just period. We'll figure out how to incentivize people to, to make some of it affordable, et cetera. But I think those splitting up the housing and making sure we cover those components, which are very much in the public eye, and I think we'll probably hear about, all really important to me, and have the DEI component, and they have an economic component, and they have a sustainability component. I think those three values that we talked about, environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and social sustainability in terms of EDI and other matters, I think those run through all of these pieces, so I don't call them out as separate myself. I think, so housing is one. I'm also thinking in terms of infrastructure. One of the benefits of being on the Louisville Revitalization Commission is that's one of the centerpieces of what urban renewal is about, is trying to think about transformative infrastructure. And again, does that cover, it feeds into all of the things that you all have been talking about, transportation and EDI and walkability, and a lot of these things are a function of that. But to really think and to think a little bit potentially out of the box. For example, one of the things that might be worth thinking about. This is just my example. I'm sure each of you has another one. Would be a lot of communities our size have some sort of performing arts center. We don't. And we make our art center work really hard. Still has a huge purpose. It would have a huge purpose no matter what. But is that something, that we need from socially, economically, environmentally? Maybe those kinds of infrastructure issues, I think, are really important. Economic vitality, I think Councilmember Dickinson, chairs the Economic Vitality Committee of the council, suggested a number of ways of thinking about that. I think what I would also say, again, thinking of this carving it up in a slightly different way, is we do have areas in the city that economically have a lot of potential that we're not taking advantage of. And there are impediments to that. And I think of the Castle Corridor as just a place that is our number one area of revenue production in the city. But, and we need to figure out how we manage that. And people who are fire recovery, anybody who's on the west side of the city, it's nice to have something there for people to a destination like downtown. It's not to say downtown is worth, that's another piece of this, but it's one of just a big piece, I think, that Yeah, so I think those are the ones I would say. Other comments about one another? Yeah, Member Hamilton.
So I suspect the reason why you put this question on there is to confirm what you already were gathering as potential topics and to see if we'll throw out any curveballs. And we're expecting, were there any curveballs that we need to unpack it for, or do you feel like we're speaking the same language here?
I see only moderate fastballs coming our way.
They're sort of medium balls, not fast.
Yeah.
I don't know about that, the rest of the group, but yeah, I was usually definitely, aligned with, but obviously we'll do.
I love, I did never considered it as a component of this, and I'm not sure why, but the infrastructure piece, like adding a performing arts, or at least having the conversation with the community, because that's expensive. But, and if I could throw one more in on that delightful idea, is a community center. We have a recreation center, which is essentially a pay-per-use gym, and we have a senior center. We have nothing for anybody in between. Superior has a delightful one. I'd love to present something like that as a gathering place for our community to continue to engage.
I'll just throw one more out again. This is sort of an old thing, but I still hear about it is, a multi-use field, like most cities have some sort of complex where you can have all those multi-use, a grass field, that takes all those different sports. I'm dumbfounded by the fact that City of Louisville has like absolutely no quality soccer, multiple frisbee, whatever, name it, all the sports that can happen across on a field. So I think that's something that looking at land use and areas and potential for that, I know we already have concepts and ideas that didn't come to fruition, so that's one.
Get into that much detail?
Oh, I retract, I strike my comment for the record.
There has also been a lot of requests for pickleball.
Yes.
Dude, if we could vote that hard.
Right.
The outdoors is really important to Louisville. One of the things we haven't talked about, open space. That's a huge issue, open space and park. We just passed a really, big tax. You undoubtedly know about that or learn more about that. And, I think it's gonna be a huge issue, depending on how you calculate it. 40% of Louisville is open space. So, how that fits into the picture, it's part of this outdoors, but it's not, clearly, open spaces. Limited development and taking care of the environment and taking care of habitat and protecting and so forth. And some acquisition, that's part of the tax that we just passed too. I mean, all of those things I think are important to consider too. But this is a community that loves its outdoors for sports, for walking, for animal and bird and human habitat, and those are really, really important as well. So that's got to be a piece of this. What other things do we get?
He's pointing to Jeff.
City manager.
I just wanted to make sure you were acknowledged.
I appreciate that.
There he is. Do you feel acknowledged?
I do.
Okay. Go ahead.
I feel like I'm in a shred.
Jesus Christ.
Seriously?
I can't, sorry. No, I just want to point out a couple things. One, just remember that we do have the parks and open space planning effort as part of our work plan for this year as well. Still working through the scoping on that, but that'll be kind of a companion process, if you will, where I think that's the appropriate place to talk about pickleball and soccer fields and those type of things. Open space and parks, and we can talk about maybe share your perspective, but it is a part of this overall comp plan, right? But in terms of the details where a pickleball court makes sense and those type of things. I think where trails are, I think that's more like that effort. And that is gonna be kicking off here before too long. Let me know if you guys want to have the same type of conversation about, well, I mean, we'll probably be bringing the RFP scope for your consideration. So, anticipate that. And then as far as, wherever it came from, Performing Arts Center, I think, and community center. And we should talk about this. Do these facilities make sense as part of this conversation? But somewhere we do have to have a conversation about this, because when I think about this, where I put my budget hat on, there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that we're starting to talk about as far as all the wish lists we have in this community. There's a museum wish out there, city services is busting at the seam, city hall is busting at the seam. What are we gonna do with all these facilities? And what can we afford to do is a big question that I anticipate being a big challenge for this council and maybe your successors in the next couple of year term, in terms of, what are we really hoping to, what are the priorities as far as public facilities? And how do we pay for those, to make those things happen? So we should talk about whether that makes sense as part of this process. We talked about doing a facilities master plan. We just don't have capacity for that right now, so let's kind of keep that on the list and we'll get back to you as far as whether that maybe fits in here somewhere else, but there's a lot of other facilities out there that you're talking about, so just make sure you're thinking about the dollar side.
Yeah, and maybe to clarify, I think what Councilmember, or Fairport had talked about in terms of fiscal sustainability is huge. It's got to be part of all the discussions as well. I mean, it's part of, attracting new business, supporting the current business we have and expansions of those businesses. But it's also about what we can handle. And what we can handle is a community in terms of spending or bonding and how that affects, we've tax issues that relate to that. Tax issues all over the place with respect to housing.
So just a note on this too, is I don't want to constrain people to think creatively too. This is also think of this plan as a 20-year vision, has a 10-year implementation horizon. So you might think of things, I mean, we did this in the TMP. We tried to think 20, 30 years in the future. It was not intended to be built all within 1 or 5 years. I think you get overwhelmed with that. So I think, I would also say, yeah, like it has to make sense fiscally. It's like, we're clearly not gonna do it, and that can be really frustrating to put things in plans. But I also, so hope we all think about the 20-year vision, and, that might help, you might think of something that you wouldn't otherwise think of if you're just being like, well, what can I afford in the next 6-year CIP? There might be things that we can't afford for 15 years, but we want to start thinking about them now.
And a lot of the kind of recent discussions we've had, we've had a number of very, very big infrastructure projects. I can think of, obviously the rec center and a waste treatment center, which is the single biggest infrastructure project we ever have had. And then the city services building. I mean, these are things, and I think of the recreation center, for example. Well, right, the library, and there's others, but the recreation center happened very quickly. I agree with you that these are things that we don't want to raise expectations in the community of something happening, popping up as a result of the comp plan. It has something, there are pieces of it that what I'm suggesting is there's going to be community interest in some things that may not exist. And infrastructure cases can be helpful. If we're trying to get younger people, or one of the things is to try to get younger families to move in, having amenities, business amenities, cultural and social amenities, open space, all these things are important. The arts are critically important too. So I'm just throwing that out as the kinds of things. I'm just saying infrastructure because I think that supports some of the rest of what we're talking. But I think to the point, we got a lot of wants and, never enough money to support. Yes.
Yeah, I just had one more of an overarching question for you guys. I just don't understand how the questions, the process, I don't think you're trying to have like a scientific survey type result. I just, if we were to direct staff to ask every resident, every one of these events that you're ever gonna do you want a performing arts center? Well, the feedback we're gonna get is gonna be about a performing arts center a lot. People are gonna be talking about it all the time, because we're asking everybody that question. And if we never ask anybody that question the entire time, no one seems to really care much about a performing arts center, and no one's really talking about it, right? So I just don't know how that works, right? Like, how do you, like, again, any of the examples, like, do you want a soccer field? Well, if you ask nobody,
I think you ask the residents what's missing, what do you wanna see, and it's an open-ended question,
Right.
then they can come up with their own ideas, and then you look for trends.
yeah. Yeah, well, and again, it's like, if you're asking that question, and I'm thinking about Councilmember Hamilton. It's literally your job, right? This is what you do, so I have great faith that you know what you're doing, but it's good to hear sort of like, but, okay, but how does that work, right? Because again, there's an assumption of, for me, bias in the questions or in the way things are framed, that like, God, it must be difficult to cut through that bias and know that you're not doing like push polls where you're, if you're at the street fair asking people what they think about downtown events, you're gonna get one response, right? Then if you're asking that same question somewhere else.
And I think Jeff said it really well. I'm not gonna be able to say it
Yeah.
nearly as well as he did, but he talked about when we do the community input, that there's, like, not everybody's gonna agree, and there's gotta be a balance, and the consultants, and ultimately your job, really, I mean, the consultants, it's really your job to hear that and balance, have a fair balance of what the community wants, and it may not be what everybody wants.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and I just, it doesn't, the process is important, and we're gonna have we expect to have a really robust, good process. There's gonna be some hard conversations probably along the way. So just remembering the whole time that we all have to look at the community input and really try to understand and find balance in the final recommendations. So I think that's, as we're going through this process over the next year, or maybe even a little bit more, keep reminding ourselves that we're trying to create the best process we can, and people disagreeing is part of the process, and it doesn't mean the process is broken or flawed along the way, but we have to come up with the best plan we can next year and a half.
I think one other, again, sort of the fault line, but it's not a fault. It's a big meta question, is change versus continuity, right? And there are certainly people in Louisville who love it the way it is, or the way it was, that they're good, and that is that's a really broad statement, but there are people, and depending on the issue, people change it. But, what things, how things change, how the comp plan, how the comp plan is gonna be different from the previous comp plan. But broadly stated, I think that's gonna, that'll be an issue. It's not something that's terribly tangible, but you certainly will hear it. I can't underscore, I've mentioned a couple of things that would be great. I feel like I shouldn't even have said anything about performing arts. I'm just, it may flow from some of the discussion. It's a very specific thing. But I mean, you have to ask people what they like, what they don't like. In terms of X, Y, Z. And I have comfort that people know how to ask those questions, that they'll ask the right questions and stay away from ones. I do have a question about, what about the plans that we already have, and what's their status? Are those givens? I mean, do we work around those plans and use them as premises or, I don't know the answer. How, what do you envision?
Yeah, I would say, our idea, and we talked about this a little bit, is we would prefer to have one consolidated comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
There's lots of pieces and elements. I mean, it doesn't mean this replaces, the transportation plan is not a the comprehensive plan. So that would continue to live on until it gets amended, but anything that's a comprehensive plan, element, we would want to, recreate that. I think the plan has to be really explicit too. We need to say, this is what it's gonna replace, and these are the plans that, and the policies that are to be maintained. And so that's something I've noticed in the, over time, we got like the Highway 42 comprehensive plan, the Urban Renewal District comprehensive plan, that was a formal amendment to the comprehensive plan. There's questions about whether those policies are still relevant. So I think we'll put that in this document when we get to that final drafting. Maybe a list of, current active policies so that we all have full knowledge and transparency that, that these are all the current policy documents that are relevant to at least land use development. That's what I've envisioned, which is a very specific answer, kind of in the weeds, but I've actually put a lot of thought into that.
Yeah.
Knowing the history of the city and our planning process.
Yeah.
Just one quick thing is that there's been a lot of discussion about what we want to do, what we want to build, what we want to have. I think, one of our highest priorities needs to be maintaining what we have already. Maintaining the rec center and the city hall and the library, the roads and the open space, and we have to protect and preserve that as our first priority. And then see if we can add any of these things from our wish list.
Other comments about the issues? I guess, again, maybe if we don't have any more comments, then I would ask the experts and maybe each of you whether you're have some sense of the priorities that we've talked about. I mean, from what I've heard, housing is huge, economic vitality is huge. And I think livability, I'm kind of moving up in the level of generality, but that includes the small town feel and the walkability and a lot of other kinds of look and feel of the city. I mean, I'm trying to sort of capture it so that there's still only three, but I struggle with that. I think that the kinds of things that have to be reflected in all that are fiscal sustainability, maybe first and foremost, and economic sustainability and environmental sustainability and social sustainability, DEI. But tell me what you all think of that, and then, I'd like to get some feedback from staff. Yeah. Well. Yeah. All right, well, what about staff? Others? Good.
I want to make sure I understand the question.
Well, I'm trying to,
Just to summarize.
yeah, I'm trying to summarize the top three issues, and they may be just in general.
Yeah, and I guess I would, this is just the first conversation. We've got lots of conversations. I think making people pick three is always an interesting exercise. It doesn't mean that the next 5 or 10 issues that are important to everybody will be ignored. So I just want to, that I think, we've gotten really good feedback here. We're going to continue to get feedback on what people's top issues and priorities are. I think, we've got good notes. I don't know if what I'm hearing is, fiscal sustainability and how people feel about their community those are gonna be really critical things. I'm hearing those as maybe some of the top two.
And housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely hearing like, I'm thinking of like two levels that I'm hearing. There's like, there's certain topics that like, it's almost like there's a lens that we need to be looking through in the sense of everything. So those being sustainability in the sense of like all of it, environment, equity, economy, and that includes fiscal health. And then EDI, so there's almost like a lens and a filter for everything. And then there's the specific topics that are hot button that I think we've heard, we planned on doing, certainly, because it's a comprehensive plan, but it reinforces the need to do a deeper dive on housing affordability, transportation. Those are the two big ones that came up. In terms of like public facilities and parks and things like that, I mean, I think thankful that you brought that up and sort of grounded the discussion in terms of maybe a better home for those really detailed things, but yeah, I like the idea of the lens and some of these specific topics are helpful for us to sort of guide us going forward.
Yeah, the economic vitality in the two, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I guess what I'm hearing too is a reflection of your work plan as a city council for this year. I think it's very reflective of that.
Yeah.
So we're pretty aware as staff of the priorities as well.
About our, so suddenly feel about this.
Yeah, I was gonna say what Jeff had mentioned. I think that this idea of having some key lenses that all topics within the plan are thought about through is really a great direction, and those might become core values that in terms of how we structure the plan. So sort of excited to dig into that. I think the other thing that I would just reflect on is that a lot of communities, when they talk about infrastructure, they really mean pipes and roads. And what I heard tonight was a much broader definition of what infrastructure means. And again, that sort of helps us as we're crafting questions and thinking about prioritization and moving forward, how to ask some of these questions of the community. So just really appreciative of the conversation.
Silence here. Feedback from council about what you heard from staff. I would say one thing. I'm really looking forward to this. I appreciate all the work that's gone in it so far. There'll be a lot more opportunities for public input on all of these things. And I think you heard that over and over tonight. That is of critical importance to all of us. And the ways in which you gather that, I'm confident are going to be great. And if they're not, you'll hear about it from us and the community. I have absolute certainty about that. And I think the guardrails that we've kind of been touching on, right, that some of the issues may be better, they may have a bit better home than the comp plan, but I'm just thinking of kind of the previous iteration of the comp plan, or the parts of the comp plan that I heard. They touched on a lot of different pieces that all of us have mentioned at one point or another, whether there was a suggestion that their home might be somewhere else. I think the challenge for you is to try to figure out how to guide that discussion, but also be guided by the community. That's an incredibly challenging task to coordinate. And it's going to be, when it comes back to us, there's going to be a lot of evidence and input. There'll be a lot of documents and data. And it is going to be up to, planning commission initially, and then the council to try to weight all of those all of that information. And so some of it comes from public meetings, and some comes from non-public meetings, some of the focus groups and so forth. It's information, it's helpful, it's not determinative. Council is going to have to, with a lot of citizen input at that stage, especially, weight what is important. We know that the citizens will have things that can be more and less important and can help us with that. And that part of it is gonna be a real challenge, and maybe all of it will be a real challenge. I think what Councilmember Kern mentioned a little bit ago is the need for this to be fun at some level, to be a fun process, because what you're doing is talking about what the future of your city is gonna look like. What do you want your kids to see? Well, it is. That's really kind of cool. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be in this seat. I think it's probably true for most of us, that we care about the city, and the city cares about this stuff. It's trying to activate that. And I think there are a lot of, what we haven't really talked about is ways in which the comp plan process may serve some of the other things that we're trying to do. Some of the gatherings may be good places for input, not just for you guys as consultants and staff, but also for the committees, maybe some of the boards and commissions to gather input or whatever. But that's a whole separate set of issues. These, I think the whole process is gonna be very exciting. I'm just excited, but I think we need to get people excited about it without raising expectations beyond what is possible. I think that is a real challenge at times. You can have fun in deciding what to keep and what to have to. I mean, are there other thoughts tonight from council, from staff, from? Here, utter silence. And it is now 8:43. So do you feel like you have what you need? Right, yeah. Is there anybody, who's involved on the staff side or the side of the consultants to, I have questions about, want feedback about? This is like the part of the deposition where you're adding, is there anything else? Is there anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Thanks for